Welcome to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell, your bright spot to your Saturday morning. I'm your host, Trillia, and I am so excited to be here today and to bring this show today. I must admit, part of my excitement might be because in about 2 days, I'm going on vacation. And I love work. But I love the chance to rest. And I think it's so hard sometimes to rest. And so today I am going to talk about it. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. And I want us to begin thinking about rest and work. And often we do when it comes time for the summer, where that's when the rest part of our work, it kind of comes in our minds like, oh, yes, we need to rest. But here's the reality. We live in an anxious world and in an anxious time. Likely all of us here right now, as we're listening in, are anxious about many things. If I asked you to take out a piece of paper and write down all of your burdens and everything that you have to do, it might be longer than we'd like to admit. We get bogged down by our sin, overwhelmed by the cares of the world and society, disappointed in how our lives are going, fearful, you name it. Rest can seem elusive. How do we rest? How do we get there? When we take one look away from God and his son, we can easily fall into despair. So before I even talk about the physical rest, I just want to encourage you with a biblical vision of our spiritual rest. If we want true rest, we must want Jesus. Jesus says in Matthew 11:28, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." The context here is likely regarding the laws and ordinances that were being forced on the people by the religious rulers, the Pharisees at the time. They were oppressed by legalism. And legalism, by definition, is any time we try to earn God's favor with our work, but our work being trying to work for our salvation, trying to be good enough. Well, we can't do it. Thank you for that. We cannot do it. Our salvation is by grace alone, through faith alone, through Jesus alone. Praise God for that. So we can rest in that our salvation belongs to the Lord and God gives it to us freely. But the broader application is that we receive rest for our souls because of what Jesus has already accomplished for us through the gospel. It is finished, right? We can come to him and rest in him for his forgiveness and grace. One commentary said, Jesus does not give rest to all the heavy laden, but to those of who show their want of relief by coming to him. That is that's like a wonky way of saying, come to him and he will give you rest. So he gives rest to those who come to him. And that is what I want us to focus on. Come to Jesus and receive rest, spiritual rest. There are a few ways to rest, but I want us to really start thinking about the physical rest. I have a friend, a dear friend, and she, a dear friend who I love so much. She was really tired all the time. And when you're tired all the time, you are irritable, annoyed. But she couldn't figure out what was going on, but she really wanted to flee everything. She was a homeschooling mother of several children. She was involved in her church, dedicated to her friends. There was more going on in her life than she realized. She soon became to hate everything, right? She soon came to hate everything because she felt like she was just pulled very thin. Her marriage began to buckle under the weight of her jam-packed schedule that left little time for meaningful communication. Her desire to be with her children suffered greatly. She started to resent church. I mean, you just name it. She wanted to quit everything. And maybe right now you relate. And really, I didn't blame her. But quitting wasn't her answer. And sometimes quitting some things are, right? And we'll talk about that. Although she probably did need to thin out some activity. Beneath that desire to flee and the compounding frustrations in her life was a deep fatigue. What she really needed was space to rest and to play. Does any of that sound familiar in your life right now? Do you resonate with the fatigue and lack of margin that characterized my friend's life? I wish I could say I close my eyes each night, excited to rest. I wish I could say that I look with eagerness and excitement on evenings when I have a lot to do, but my kids want to talk. At one time, they wanted to play, but now they want to talk because they're teenagers. The truth is, there's always so much to be done. Always. There are dishes to watch and laundry to sort, an email to respond to, an article or book due. It just keeps coming. The work never ends. So despite organizers and apps and calendars to keep up with it all, it can seem nearly impossible. Do you have days like that? Some days I feel like I've become a slave to the needs of others and to my own desires to check things off my to-do list. But if I find freedom in acknowledging that I simply can't do it all, that is where the Lord begins to build some rest and peace in my life. I really can't, and neither can you. We cannot do it all. We need to acknowledge that. We need to ask the Lord for help. And the psalmist cautioned us, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil. For he gives to his beloved sleep. Rest reminds me that unless the Lord builds the house, my labors are in vain. If I'm working like crazy, but I'm filled with anxiety and fear, then my labors are meaningless. Rest is a gift from God to me, his beloved, and most of the rest that I need is both physical and mental. I need to rest in the Lord. I need to entrust my work to the Lord. When I don't take advantage of it, when I work all hours because I'm worried about getting things done or I have a false sense of success, which we will talk about soon, I'm actually being selfish by God's standards. Who would think that not resting ultimately in the Lord, is actually selfish? Who would think that? Well, isn't it good news that we are invited to rest in the Lord and that God invites us to physically also rest? I am learning how to rest, and it is so freeing. What a relief to admit that only God can efficiently and effectively work 24 hours a day without rest. And, here's the good news also. He rested. Right? Look at the creation story. We see a God who created, and then rested. What a good example for us. Our bodies and minds aren't designed to keep going and going and going. Do y'all remember the Energizer Bunny? That's going and going, going. We can't do it. In fact, periods of rest allow us for better rest in the Lord. And I believe productivity in work. It refuels us. But maybe that's not always the goal. Are you having trouble resting? Maybe you are having trouble saying no. Or maybe you are working in an environment where it's tough to take a break, or you feel like you have to do all of these things, or maybe you'll get hammered. Maybe that's what's causing this issue in you. It could be not just that you're having trouble, but maybe your environment isn't lending itself well to the rest that you need. I have asked my friend Philip Holmes to come on the show and help us navigate the times when we need help adjusting our work habits, or even times when it's time to walk away. We need help navigating what it is in us, but also evaluating, okay, what is it around us that might be hindering us from enjoying that rest in our heart and the physical rest that we need. Philip Holmes is coming in just a minute, but I want to give you the phone line because our phone lines are open and maybe this is resonating with you already. Do you need help learning how to rest in the Lord? Do you need help learning what it means to say no, to take a vacation, to figure out what is work-life balance? Okay, I have a theory on that. I don't think it exists, but we'll talk about it. If you want to join the conversation, give us a call at 877-548-3675 or 877-LIVE-675. Again, it's 877-548-3675 or 877-LIVE-675. We also read our emails and would love to hear from you. If you want to send us an email, you can do so at livingbyfaith@moody.edu. Again, that's livingbyfaith@moody.edu. Give us a call and we will talk to you about what it means to rest in the Lord and rest in your work. And maybe you have other questions as they come up. Again, 877-548-3675 or 877-LIVE-675. livingbyfaith@moody.edu. We are all going to learn today to enjoy this summer break, to enjoy the Lord. And I cannot wait to get into it more when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. I am talking today about work and life and work-life balance, whatever that is, but also about how we can build in rest and also what keeps us from thriving and resting in the Lord and thriving at work. I have asked my friend Philip Holmes to come on the show to help us. Philip Holmes is a coach, consultant, and speaker. He helps professionals who feel stuck and undervalued in challenging work environments gain clarity, rebuild confidence, and develop the skills to lead effectively. As the founder of Highest Good, Philip is dedicated to making leadership development accessible so organizations are healthier and work is more fulfilling. Philip, welcome to the show.
Hey, Trillia. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we go way back. And
Way back.
yes, I was like probably 20 years. I mean, not just at least
About 15
years.
Yeah.
Yes. That's amazing. And so one of my coworkers was looking at your videos and he was so intrigued. He was like, Trillia, have you seen these videos of this guy? And I was like, oh, that guy is a friend of mine, Philip. And I was like, and I know he's already been talking to you but it is really compelling, the things that you are sharing. But we go 15 years way back. And so I know that you have to go from working in seminaries and working in small organizations to owning your own organization. There's some kind of path that took you there, but I would like to for those who don't know you as well as I do, I would love for them to get to know you and how you came to want to start Highest Good, but it really starts with your testimony. So will you share how you came to know the Lord and what led you to this journey of trying to help leaders grow in their leadership?
Yeah, thanks. My story as far as how I came to know the Lord started at a very, very early age. I was raised in a small town called Pickens, Mississippi. It's about 45 minutes north of our state capital, Jackson, Mississippi, which is where I reside now in Jackson. And my grandmother, who raised me up until I was 13, my mom usually lived with us or was next door. My grandmother, though, played a huge role in my spiritual formation. And we lost her right around 2022. But I was in church every Sunday. And every time the church door was open, I was there in Sunday school, in Bible study, in choir rehearsal. And right around the age of 8 or 9, I made a profession of faith. And, when you make a profession of faith that early, and as you grow and your faith becomes more and more your own, the line kind of gets murky sometimes about when the conversion actually happened.
Right. Yeah.
But that faith continued all the way through college, and it was in college where I guess I would call that phase 2, where there was this new level of ownership, this new level of clarity. I think now, looking over the last 20, 30 years, I'm 37 now. I keep having those phases, right, where you have
Yeah.
greater and greater clarity about your walk with the Lord, who you are in the sight of God, and so I would say that's how I came to know the Lord. That's the very short version, if
Yeah.
you will. But the gospel, as I've grown, and as I'm now a husband, a father, the gospel is so dear to me, and I'm seeing clearer probably than I feel like I've ever seen the significance of what it means to be a Christian, and how Christ and what Christ has accomplished for us in his death, burial, and resurrection.
Amen. It's interesting as we get older, that's the hope, is that we would cling closer and closer to Jesus. And I think, I wonder if part of it, or I'll just say for myself, part of that has been stripping away, like the Lord stripping certain things away. And then another part of it has just been realizing, I think when you're young, you kind of, well, I don't want to typecast young people, but I have noticed in my own heart that I felt like I knew it all. And then you realize as you get older, you don't know. It's not, you just don't know as much and there's this humbling realization that you just need Jesus. And that to me, I think
Absolutely.
it's become simplified a little bit more than, I think I'm made everything so complex. And so you're now a father of 4 or 5?
3.
3. Sorry, you're like,
3.
I'm not
Yeah.
being prophetic.
A father of 3
sorry.
boys.
3.
Yeah.
Oh, all boys. Okay.
All
That is
boys.
so funny. I don't know why I thought more. I think it's because I don't know, actually. Okay, so you are a father. I don't know. A father of 3.
No, Trillia, you thought that because you've known me for so long and you knew my former aspirations before I got
That's
older,
probably
wiser,
it.
and a little bit more humble.
That's probably it. You're like, oh, well, we won't take the baseball team anymore. So
Yeah.
that is so funny. But your career trajectory has also taken several twists and turns, but higher ground. What made you decide, you know what? I'm going to take my theological training because you're theologically trained, and I'm going to help leaders now grow in how they lead because that's really such an interesting turn. It doesn't surprise me, but it is a turn. So take us on a journey of your training and what inspired you to start Higher Ground.
Yeah, highest good.
Highest good. I am so sorry. I don't
No worries.
know. Highest
So
good. Yeah.
the story is complex because I've been in leadership circles around leaders my entire life. One of the things that I skipped in my testimony because I didn't know if it would necessarily be relevant is that I actually started preaching at the age of 11 and was licensed to preach in the
Wow.
National Baptist Convention at the age of 12. And
Okay.
so,
Wait,
yeah.
pause.
Okay.
First of all, I really want to apologize for saying higher ground. Highest good. And higher ground, I believe, is a Stevie Wonder song, which is
I
why
love
I
it.
did that. So I am for very sorry. Highest Good is your organization, but you started preaching at the age of 11 and was ordained by 12,
Licensed to
licensed
preach. Hmm.
licensed to preach. Okay, I think I've heard of others who, how does that even happen?
That's a great question, Trillia. And it's not a path that I would recommend, but it
Okay.
happened because one said that when somebody says that they're called to preach, um, pastors will examine them, ask questions, and if they believe that the call is genuine, they will allow them to preach a trial sermon.
Wow.
And then over the course of a year or two, they will license the individual.
That's
And so that's how it works. And it doesn't really matter how old you are. Um, so yeah, so that's how it works.
that's how it works. Okay, so you were licensed to preach and then carry on.
Yeah, I was licensed to preach, and so and I said that because I'm 37, but I've been around grown men in leadership positions behind the scenes, right, ever since the age of 11.
Mm.
And um, as I got older, I went to college, got a degree in biblical studies, and then eventually went to seminary and was on the pastoral track for a while. Um, and I was, again, back in the circles, but in a kind of a different denomination um, around leadership. And eventually I got to a place where I started getting jobs, and I worked for several different organizations. And the seasons in those organizations had their highs and their lows for me. I was very fascinated with leadership because I always kind of felt like when it came to leadership, everyone was figuring it out as they went. There seemed to not be the way my brain works. I'm ADHD. Um, I work in frameworks, and so ambiguity doesn't really resonate with me. I like
Mm.
clarity.
Yeah.
And I never really felt like when it came to how to lead, there was clarity and there were some character expectations that we talk about when it comes to leadership, but what does that look like practically? And I never really got that clarity. And I think I think my suspicions were confirmed because um, during the last probably 2 years of my job before I transitioned out on my own, I was having a conversation with one of the senior leaders, and I asked them. I said, why don't we have a leadership um, courses or a leadership track? And they said that, hey, I don't really believe that. I think leadership is something that you're born with. You either have it or you don't. And I thought that was interesting. And now, several years later, I know that it's profoundly incorrect.
Yeah.
And but that's the mindset that we have, is that leadership is something that you just have or you don't. And what we're really describing is charisma, and
Oh,
charisma and
yes.
leadership are not the same thing. And so essentially, what happened is I um, experienced some leadership hardships and some challenges on my own. I also experienced some dysfunction, and I would say also toxicity when it comes to some leadership that I was under. And that kind of was a wake up call for me. And then when I went out on my own, I saw that I'd also brought some of that dysfunction with me.
Hmm.
And and then I began to get curious. I was like, I was trying to build my business. I was like, I got to figure out what this leadership thing actually looks like.
Well, we will talk about what this leadership thing looks like in just a moment. More when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. I am talking with Philip Holmes. He is the founder of Highest Good, and he helps leaders develop and understand how to have healthier work environments, as well as, I'm assuming also, Philip, that you're helping leaders develop themselves as well. And one of the interesting things is that I opened the phone lines and also shared my email, and we have people pouring in to email us to ask questions about rest and work and work cultures. And so I want to give the phone line again, just in case people have a question. You can call us at 877-548-3675 or 877-LIVE-675 or email livingbyfaith@moody.edu. But you were telling us what led you to start your organization, but also to start on this topic. And you said that you started to become curious, and some leaders shared some things to you that you didn't quite agree with, but also that you were in some environments that maybe were in. You didn't use the word toxic, but maybe they led you to explore and dive into this topic more because they maybe weren't the healthiest. And so as you were doing these things, you kind of came up with a term that I've never heard of. You say that you help people detox their careers. I don't know what that means, and I'd love to learn more what that looks like, and how does this relate to rest?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I talk about detox, first of all, toxic work environments are such a huge issue in the modern day workplace. And I think it's probably always been an issue. Detoxing is about confronting the dysfunction that we've adapted to, whether it's personal, professionally, spiritually, and asking, like, for the Christian especially, like, what have I gotten used to that God never called good?
Hmm.
Right? That's very, very, very important. And so we the first thing that you have to do is you have to recognize the toxins. Dysfunction often doesn't show up as obvious evil. It shows up as normal, a culture where people are overworked, they're underappreciated, they're afraid to speak up, and they're just kind of numb to injustice. And the Bible is very, very aware that Christians, especially, are going to face this in the world. This is why Paul says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind."
Hmm.
And even in Lamentations 3:40, let us examine our ways and test them. Detox begins with naming what we've been trained to ignore. Unfortunately, this is something that has to happen not just as we're out in the world, because I think that we're hyper vigilant and hyper aware of how of the challenges and some of the snares that we might encounter in our workplace. But I don't know if we're necessarily as aware of some of the toxins and some of the dysfunction that exists even inside of the Christian community. And so, um, when we talk about detoxing, we're talking about recognizing the dysfunction for what it is, and figuring out what does this mean? Like, how is this harming me? And really testing those things.
Well, I have a question about one of them because this is, we've been talking a lot about rest, and you said one dysfunction might be overworked and underappreciated. I can imagine there's so many people who sense that they are overworked. Um, and maybe underappreciated. How, as Christians, and I want to talk you to talk to leaders right now. So me, I'm a leader. How could someone like me make sure that my team doesn't feel like they are? I will also say there are safeguards, thankfully, in place where I am. But how should someone who's leading make sure that their team doesn't feel overworked and underappreciated?
I think first of all, the leader um, has to recognize that they have a responsibility that is bigger than them. Um,
Hmm,
there's
that's
always
good.
a yellow flag when I'm working with leaders and I'm working with a client, and they say something like, "Well, they're going to make me look bad," or "My team is making
Oh,
me look bad," and they make themselves kind of the center of their team's output. Um, I think sometimes when we try to control people and outcomes, we become it's a sign of unhealthy leadership
hmm,
because you become so obsessed with getting what you want, and getting and making yourself look good, and you can often do this at the expense of the people that you are actually called to serve. And so if a leader has a servant's mentality and it says, "Hey, my job is to make sure that you guys are flourishing, that you're thriving, and that we're succeeding," we have to make sure that we've defined success properly. And what success does not always mean is the most possible profit we can make. What
hmm,
is does not always mean is that we're going to um, um, win, or we're going to accomplish every single goal.
yeah,
What it should mean is that the people under me are growing, they're developing, they're maturing, they're getting better at their profession, and we are moving towards something that is a long term goal rather than um, prioritizing short term gains. Because that's often what I see happening is that leaders who burn their people out, who overwork their people, they are obsessed with the short term results rather than the long term gain.
well, I have a question for you about that because
Sure.
sometimes it's not necessarily the leader, it's the we ourselves burn ourselves out because we want something from, we want our appreciation, or we want to prove our worth, or so. How do you work that out of yourself? Does that make sense? So I do agree
Yeah.
100% with everything you said. I also realize my own temptation to overwork, so that because I don't want to disappoint. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so there's two ways to look at this because I want to talk about this from the leader's perspective as well. A leader can't just be reactive. Sometimes we try to wait for people to bring us a problem and then solve it. We have to
Mm,
get to know the people that we serve and that we work with well enough to be able to spot these dysfunctional signs,
yeah.
so that we can have those conversations with them in our one-on-one. Hey, how much time are you spending with your family? Hey, I saw you worked. Every week. So one of the practices that we do is every week I look at the amount of hours that my people work, and they have to me. And someone consistently working over their hours, we have a conversation about that, and it's a curious conversation. Hey, um, what made you have to go over your hours? And they get paid the same whether they work over or less, right?
Hmm.
These are salary employees, so it's not. I don't gain or benefit from them underworking or overworking, in a sense, from a financial standpoint.
Hmm.
And so we have a question. And the question, I want to know, what is their workload looking like? Is there anything that we need to do? I need to slow things down as a business owner, so that they have more time to spend with their family, and to get off work so that they don't have to work more than their assigned time.
Hmm.
And then so from that's from the leader. That's just a quick sample from the leader standpoint. But from the individual standpoint, I think you're 100% right. There's a responsibility and ownership that we have to take. But this is why I talk about detoxing, because there's a narrative, there's a story that we're usually telling ourselves about how our output defines our worth. And
Yeah.
we have to confront those lies. We have to expose them, and then we have to really be curious about where did they come from, how do we get here, and then how do we address them.
That is so good. More with Philip Holmes when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. We have been talking about leadership, rest, work, our struggles to rest, and how we can have some false ideas of success. And you started to get into that, Philip. So I want to return to it because I really love that you say we often carry toxic definitions of success, and I'd love for you to help us navigate that. I do wonder also. Um, my producer Karen Hendren, she and I were talking during the break, and she wrote that stress can be a stressful topic in and of itself, and that this idea of trying to balance work and rest can be really stressful. So, is there really a balance there that can be that we can achieve? What does it look like to work as unto the Lord, but also to rest?
So I think that goes back to our attempts to control outcomes.
Yeah.
We think that our work is the thing that gets it done, and that without us, the thing won't happen, whatever that thing is. And so overworking oftentimes is a sign that you're trying to make something happen, or you believe that it won't happen unless you do XYZ.
Hmm.
And so you become kind of obsessed.
Yeah.
But we call it caring. We say, I just care too much. No, that's called being obsessing and controlling. And what happens is when we try to justify it, we'll spiritualize burnout and call it sacrifice.
Mm.
And I think we have to be very careful, because what it means to work unto the Lord, that means we're to be faithful and in our work and do what we're called to do to the best of our abilities. And then resting means putting it into his hands, giving it to him. I did my
Mm.
best. I'm going to give God the rest, because he has a group of people, he has a community of people. Uh, you're not the only instrument that he uses. And so, you also recognize that your identity is not in your output.
It's so good.
I think that's very, very important.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
not valuable because of what you do. You're valuable because of who you are. I think we've forgotten our
Yeah.
intrinsic worth as
Hmm.
not just as Christians, but as people, right? Because I think this is a message not just for the believer, but for the unbeliever as well. That just as a human being, you have dignity and value and intrinsic worth
Yeah.
because you were created by God.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. I think that is the key here, is to remember who we are and whose we are, or whom's we are. We're God's, and we are created by God. And I think we do forget that. We forget who we are. And when we do that, we I don't know. There's so much that you're saying that resonates with my own heart and is convicting, just especially the idea that, oh, I've got to do it, got to finish, got to do this. As if God can't accomplish what he sets out to accomplish without my work. So that is really good and so convicting and encouraging to know that we don't have to. We can give it to the Lord and we could submit it to Him. You know, someone wrote in and wrote this. Resonates pretty strongly with me talking about today's message and talk today. I think a lot of the reason I say yes and overdo multiple things is typically because most people will not accept no or get very upset and sometimes even retaliate. Or they will somehow find a way to guilt you into doing too much even after you have said no. So that's interesting. So he still is, and he goes on to talk about other things that sounds like he might be talking about marriage, actually, if you keep reading, if I kept reading. But have you found that some people are just afraid because of the reaction of others? So they work because they fear that they might be retaliated against, or that someone will be angry, or something will be withheld. Have you seen that as this Jared wrote in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's true on both sides. It's true that um, people are afraid. People are afraid that they will be retaliated against if they say no, if they set boundaries, if they try to live out their values and convictions. And then on the other hand, those feelings are valid because people will retaliate. People know how their power in certain situations can be used to take advantage of the vulnerable. And usually there's a power dynamic that exists there. And sometimes that fear is, it might not necessarily even be the other person who's going to get upset with you, but that fear is something that was placed in you from an early age because when you were younger, as a child or as a teenager, you weren't allowed to say no. You weren't allowed to set boundaries. Boundaries were
Yeah.
made to look like something that was evil. And so now you're projecting that onto the person that you're dealing with now. And so it's simple, but it's complex in a lot of ways. But I think that that individual is spot on. Is that people do take advantage of that fear and that vulnerability. And this is why it's so important for leaders to have a keen sense of awareness to make sure that they don't intentionally, especially, but also unintentionally
Yeah.
take advantage of
Yeah.
their people, which is why you have to be curious rather than assuming that just because you're okay, your team is okay.
Mm. I love this so much. We have such a short amount of time left, which makes me very sad because we could have been talking. We'll have you back on if you don't mind, Philip, because
Love to come back on.
yes, this is resonating so much with listeners, and I'm not surprised. But let's give people real practical ways that they can care for themselves. Maybe this summer, maybe this is something that you can start right now practically, and especially in relation to rest, because we could be talking about a lot of things, and we will have to get into it another time. But what are some practical steps that people can take even this month to help with some of the things that we've been talking about?
Yeah, some practical things that they can do is that they can start, I have a leadership development framework that I use. And um, I think anybody can be called to leadership. Anybody can learn leadership if they're willing to learn and live out these things. The first thing is self management. And so, what this means is, hey, I want to become self aware. Some people may have heard that term self aware. I want to understand myself. I want to understand my thoughts, my feelings, my motivations, and my actions. And that means understanding your emotions. Why do I feel the way that I feel? Like what am I feeling today? Right? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling afraid? What's making me feel that way? Right? What story am I telling myself that's triggering that feeling?
Mm.
what happened in the past,
Mm.
right? That is bringing that feeling up in this situation, and it starts really with curiosity. It's something called emotional regulation, which is something that is extremely important because what happens a lot of times is that when you say yes, when you really want to say no, that means that your emotions are dictating your actions, and that's not what our emotions are designed for. Our emotions are there to kind of signal to us that, hey, something here is familiar and it didn't work out last time.
Mm.
And so our emotions are always valid, but they don't necessarily tell us the accurate story. And
That
so
is
when
so
we
good.
acknowledge what we're actually feeling without condemning it, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
we suppress our emotions, or we say, I shouldn't feel sad that way. No, never tell yourself that. If you're feeling sad in a particular situation, or angry or frustrated, there's a reason, but don't let that dictate what you do or say next.
That is so good. I'm going to pause you there, unfortunately, because we have 1 minute left of this show. And what I'm going to promise to listeners is that I'm going to have Phillip Holmes back, because there is that in and of itself is packed with so much that we could unpack. And this is so good. So your first step, friends, is to evaluate your emotions and ask yourself if it's true. And then I would just say, take a break. Take a break. Talk to your boss, talk to your neighbor, talk to your friend, ask for help. Oh, so much in this wonderful conversation. I'd like to thank my guest, Phillip Holmes, for joining me today. Also, thanks to the behind the scenes team at Moody Radio, my producer, Karen Hendren, my associate producer, Lisa Jimty, my engineer, Merle St. James, and Rihanna, and on the phone lines. To hear today's program again, you'll find it at livingbyfaithradio.org or on the Moody Radio app. You may also connect with us through Facebook and Instagram at Living by Faith. Living by Faith is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Bible Institute.
Love what you're hearing? Get more with the Moody Radio app. Stream live local radio, enjoy music channels from contemporary worship to urban praise, and discover all 40 of our on-demand podcasts with personalized notifications. All your favorite Moody Radio content in one place. Download today.